Even when we're away from home, we are in Las Vegas, news doesn't stop. And now we have breaking news, and that is this emergency podcast brought to you by our good friends from Indeed. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/AllCity. That's Indeed.com/AllCity. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcoming in my partners, as always, Kyle Neubeck, Derek Bodner. I'm Devon Givens. Brianna is here as well. We're also presented by our great friends from Rothman Orthopedics, as we have this breaking news that Kyle Lowry himself has alerted us all, Kyle, that he is staying home with the Philadelphia 76ers. And it just seems like with this one, man, it just makes sense that he does come back to the Sixers, get the full season under his belt, and continue to build out this roster.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame to have to continue to be the second most prominent Kyle, dealing with Sixers on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
But are we sure there's not like an employee with the Sixers that we haven't heard about that's named Kyle?
It's certainly up for debate. There are no Kyles that I'm aware of other than myself and Mr. Lowry. But yeah, so this has been – it's been out there over the last week and a half that there was some – room for him to leave, potentially go to Phoenix. I know was one of the teams that was attached to him. And we've said throughout the offseason, one of the things that all of us were curious about was, could he squeeze a little bit more money potentially somewhere else and say, it's I'm still on a good team, still on a team with a chance, but maybe I can get, whether it's like $500,000, $1 million, whatever it is on top of he's got an agent who has been known to make his clients a few extra dollars. And it was more about, does he prefer to chase the biggest bag, or is he happy to stay home? What motivates him here? He ends up staying home. He's going to play what I think will be a fairly prominent role as their backup point guard. And it gives you options. Like if Jared McCain comes along quickly and he's able to play right away and give you some actual point guard skills, maybe Lowry fades to the background a little bit. If not, you have a reliable ball handler that now, given the signings that they've made, they're not relying on him to be a starter level player the way they ended up at the end of last season. So I think, despite my position on people shorter than me on the roster, which Kyle Lowry is shorter than me, I can confirm that.
Get the back
next to him in the locker room. I think
pretty significantly shorter than you too. I'm pretty sure he's shorter than me, and you definitely got an inch at least.
So I think
but he's taller than me. It's not a high bar to clear, but he's taller than me.
I think he fits a clear need, and I think all the intangible stuff will be a positive as well, just like it was when they added him last year.
Yeah, I think I will like Kyle more in this iteration of the Sixers and with the role that he will hopefully have going forward than maybe I did over the last couple of months of the season, which is no fault of Kyle's own. It's more a fault of the roster building and the delaying the decisions until the summer. Like, they just did not have the depth that they needed. Now they have much better depth. They have someone in McCain who maybe he can mentor. I think this probably makes more sense. And the fact that it's on a minimum alleviates a lot of concern. Like Kyle said, there were some discussions over whether or not he could try to squeeze a team for more than a minimum. The Sixers, after all the moves they have made, only really have that left to offer, and it's a one-year deal. So there's really not a whole lot of risk. It's not that there's no risk, because you are going to want to make sure that you gave enough room under that second apron that you can make in-season moves. So you don't want to just waste contracts, but it's very minimal risk. And if he comes in and plays 10, 15, maybe even some parts of season 20, fine. You just don't want him playing. I mean, he was playing 30 per night in the playoffs, which I don't think any of us expected when he came here. And I think that's probably one of the few if you have a concern over this signing, it's less about Kyle Lowry and more about Nick Nurse and his usage of Kyle Lowry. But having him in as a veteran mentor and somebody who can step in, make a shot, and generally do what you want him to do and make the decisions you need him to make, sure, I have no problems with this.
The overusage in the postseason, I think we talked about it even at the time, was the fact that they were just dealing with so many injuries. No DeAnthony Melton out there, unavailable to go. Of course, Joel Embiid in and out of the lineup. just needing somebody that can also take some of that pressure off of Tyrese Maxey with the ball handling. Later on, Campaign was there too, so he was helpful in the moments that he was there. But this one just makes sense because, as you guys said, it's just him coming in playing the role that he was brought in to play the role the first time. But because of all those things that occurred, he was forced to be out there on the floor. And when you do that, dealing with the injuries, the coach is going to go to his comfort zone, go to his comfort level, and his comfort level was Kyle Lowry. It was something that we discussed beforehand, but we also didn't anticipate all the injuries to really hit the Sixers the way that it did. Not an excuse in terms of the injuries as to why they lost, but it's more of just highlighting the fact that he was playing more than he should have because of the injuries that were there. So if things go right here and you add Jared McCain and he is able to pick up things pretty quickly for Nick Nurse within the structure of the offense, then you won't have to have Kyle Lowry out there as much. But he will have his games. He will have his moments out there where he's going to have a good game. Like you said, Derek, will play 25 minutes because he's rolling. He has a good hand and he has a good feel for the game. So why not just leave him in there? But mentorship for Jared McCain, who better than to learn from when you're talking about learning how to play the point guard position at a smaller size and getting that done. So all in all, just simply a good move. And as the roster is starting to build out for Daryl Morey, he again hits a nice we can call this one a single if we want, but it's a single that, continues to move runners over and using a baseball analogy, just because he's hitting everything on the right track right here at this time.
Yeah, look, I think, as Derek mentioned, I think our concerns last season are basically the same as they are now, which is it's not so much about can Kyle Lowry contribute, which I think we would all agree in the right role he can. It's will Nick Nurse, with that comfort that they have, lean heavily on him? And does that factor into Lowry's decision to stay here rather than going somewhere else? That he has an understanding, whether it's from Nurse, whether it's from Morey, whoever, that he's going to continue to play a prominent role. So it's too early to tell on that front, right? The roster has changed a lot. They'll go into next season without the rash of injuries they dealt with at the end of last year, presumably. Knock on wood on that, obviously. One of the additional questions I have now that Lowry's here, and I'm assuming he's not coming to be a towel waiver, is that, there are now concerns for McCain and who he pairs with in the backcourt, basically no matter who's on the floor for their guards, right? Like they have a small group of rotational guards, and while they have good wing size elsewhere, that leaves you potentially viable, whether that's defensively, whether it's on the glass. I think the argument with the backup unit would be that Andre Drummond is such a good individual rebounder that you make up for some of the issues with that group, but that doesn't solve all the defensive stuff. Certainly Andre has his issues there that they'll have to work around to some extent. And so I want to see how this all kind of shakes out. Then you add on the fact that Eric Gordon is one of their other guys that they brought in. And I like Eric Gordon. I like the skill set. I worry a little bit about playing guys like Lowry and Gordon together at the same time and how that potentially impacts your defense, your ability to switch and play some different coverages. So it's going to be on Nick Nurse to figure out some creative combinations and staggering the stars in a way that you kind of minimize the impact that those guys have defensively, and you get the value that I think you're hoping to get on the offensive end.
Well, he has a number of wings to mix in there with those players as you talk about with that particular unit. So curious to see, like you are, what Nick Nurse does in terms of the combinations that he'll have and juggling things along the way.
Yeah. And look, if you want to say, like, he doesn't necessarily solve the shot creation problem that the Sixers, not problem, but the deficiencies, the fact that you would love to see one more, he doesn't necessarily solve that. And he doesn't solve the power forward, I don't want to say vacancy because they have a couple of wings who can play up position, but he doesn't necessarily solve that concern either. But I think what we've been talking about a lot here over the last couple of days, weeks, first of all, you're not going to fix shot creation with a minimum salary player. You're probably not going to get a starting power forward for a minimum salary either. So you just have to be okay with that. And Daryl Morey historically has been okay going into a season with an imperfect roster if he has the flexibility to go out and fix that mid-season. And if you sign KJ to the balloon payment and you have 4 first-round picks to trade, you have the flexibility to go out and try to fix some problems that you have. So I think from his perspective, let this play out. see which problems are real, see which problems are maybe overblown, see what becomes available over the course of the season. And in the meantime, get Kyle Lowry, who can stabilize maybe some of that second unit, give you another good ball handler and decision maker, and give you some veteran presence off of the bench for a minimum contract. It makes a lot of sense.
All right, let's. I do have a couple of questions on some names that people are bringing up in the chat that we can just throw at you guys here quickly on this emergency pod that is again presented by Indeed. So let's check the resume of one Kyle Lowry coming off of his 18th campaign in the NBA from Philadelphia, of course, a Villanova alum. And checking the resume for Kyle Lowry, let's take a peek at it again. 18 years in, going into year 19 for Kyle Lowry. Did you think that when he left Villanova? 19 years in the NBA.
Kyle Lowry's career has graduated high school, Devon.
6-time All-Star and earned for every one of those recognitions there with the All-Stars. Also, NBA champion against the Golden State Warriors, but they had to get through the Philadelphia 76ers on the Kawhi Leonard shot. As we know, that was in 2019. He was a gold medalist in the 2016 Summer Olympics. Again, the North Philly native pretty much building out a solid resume. One that I know I've talked about in the past, especially if he had gotten a few more of those all-star berths. And maybe if, let's say he's with the Sixers here, they win the championship, he adds a second one. He plays maybe not the same role as he did in 2019, helping the Raptors, but an integral part here that you're probably talking about a guy that's going to be in consideration when you look at some of the other players that have gotten in to talk about Hall of Fame with his resume. So Kyle Lowry has put together a pretty darn good resume over the course of his 18 years going into year 19. And again, checking out that resume, it has been presented by our good friends from Indeed.
By the way, I feel like I always end up being like the glass of cold water being dumped on everyone's heads on these emergency pods for the most part. I do want to say they need people who can pass, right? Like that's been a big point of concern for the rest of this roster. And so in that respect, even if he's not able to leverage his playmaking as much as he once could because he can't get by guys and get to his spots, I think just having, as Derek said, a good decision maker and somebody who can make life easier for people, even if it's just with some connective passing rather than as a pick and roll ball handler, that'll certainly help quite a bit because they do not have, other than him, any high level playmakers or passers on the roster. Like Tyrese is probably the best guy after him, and we all know, he's got a ways to go to be the future point guard, franchise point guard of this team. So it's whatever issues he has, he can pass the ball, and that I certainly am grateful to have on the team because there are going to be some ugly turnover games, I suspect, for this group this season.
Derek, when you're looking at the point guard position and filling it out, as we just see here again, the news that Kyle Lowry is coming back to the Sixers, would you have preferred Campaign or Kyle Lowry for the role after drafting Jared McCain in the 16th overall selection?
I mean,
I know it's a real question because
close.
McCain took one of those spots.
Yeah, I would typically say that I trust Lowry a little more to be a low minute guy in the playoffs just because I think he can hold up defensively a little bit better. And now, last year, I think you probably needed Payne a little bit more because you didn't have someone like Paul George to be that secondary creator. And now you do. So you probably need Campaign's skill set a little bit less. So I would say probably Kyle Lowry. The main concern here is Kyle Lowry is 38. So you don't know if the Kyle Lowry that you will get in April and May and hopefully health permitting June is the same Kyle Lowry you got a couple of months ago. So that is, I think, why the pause is there. But I do think Kyle can hold up defensively a little better, even though he is shorter than Cam.
I'm basically in the same camp there. I was pleasantly surprised by Campaign last year, but I have a general skepticism for him and his weaknesses in the playoffs. So we only got to see the one round to him. Maybe our perception would have changed if they got further and there was some more time for teams to attack him a little bit.
That being said, only one of those two has told cops to F off and call him Terry Johnson.
And that's where I was going.
Factored in.
It takes away from Derek to be able to use Terry Johnson as an alias while we're at these hotels, because that is, campaign is not around anymore. It doesn't appear that he's going to be back. So that part sucks, where Derek can no longer run. Or you can run across Terry Johnson at some point a little bit later on. A few more before we step away. And that is, we still do have some roster spots for them to fill. And a few names. We've talked about Marcus Morris at the power forward position, where get your thoughts on him. Some mentioning Jay Crowder in the chat. One that came about, and I agree with you. I saw Jay Crowder up close and personal, and it was at the end in the postseason, in the finals there with the Suns in 21. But another one that I wanted you guys to talk about, because we never discussed this guy when he was waived by, I believe, the Charlotte Hornets after the trade happened. Not a rebounder. He is a forward, but he's more of a shooter. Davis Bertans, as well, as a name that is now available. So your thoughts on, you already shook off the Jay Crowder one, but Marcus Morris, Davis Bertans, any interest in either of the two?
Please, for the love of God, get somebody who's going to rebound and or defend. If not for playing purposes, at least to satiate the fan base at this point, that they're not going to go into the season with a bunch of these, old.
Who's left?
Non-defenders out there. Well, look, KJ Martin, I think we're still expecting.
Well, that one, yeah.
He hasn't signed yet, and I wouldn't take it for granted necessarily, but I do think that he's going to play. If you're looking for like a bench forward guy who's going to be the athleticism rebound type, I do think that's him. Like I would lean pretty strongly there. So yeah, maybe you go to a specialist shooter type. Bertans, if he's available for a minimum, I think it's maybe that's worth a punt. But I don't know what his vibe is either. Like, is he a guy who's going to come, and if he's just out of the rotation entirely, is still going to be a good towel waiver and whatnot? I don't know. So that's part of the calculus at this point too. There are only so many guys who can play, and if you're one of these guys that's you're just the break glass in case of emergency shooter or whatever you are, will you keep the vibes high? And so I'm not sure Bertans will do that. And he may be one of the worst rebounders relative to his size in the league. So if that's who they sign, I think we will probably have some yucks about that one.
He had a single-digit defensive rebounding rate last season. So that means he collected a defensive rebound on 9% of the missed shots he was on the floor for last year. I have never seen a dude that tall at 6'10" have that bad of a defensive rebounding rate. It's almost impossible to do. I can't believe it that I'm saying this, but yes, bring me Marcus Morris.
Okay. All right. Also saw in there
the Philly boys.
Precious Achua also brought up in there. I think Precious Achua is going to cost too much. You're probably not going to.
Yeah, he's not going for a minimum.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Well, folks, this was another emergency podcast that we needed to jump in here for with you, because Kyle Lowry returning to the Philadelphia 76ers, alerting people. Where was it, Kyle? On Instagram? He put that up there?
Yes. Yeah. So I am blanking on the name now. I want to say it's either his agent or someone connected to his agency posted a sizzle reel with some music set behind it. So, and then the big news breakers came in right at the same time. So
yeah.
Good for Kyle Lowry. Still getting a sizzle reel in his late 30s, right? That's what I have to hope for myself in a few years.
Well, might as well bring Marcus Morris back too, so we can keep the Marcus Morris moment of the night going during the 24-25 season. This emergency podcast was brought to you by the great people at Indeed. Listeners, again, of our show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/AllCity. That's Indeed.com/AllCity. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right. Again,
also,
we are all. I'm sorry.
I do just want to say I appreciate Kyle and his agency or whoever posted that for not posting it at 3 a.m. because I'm not sure we would have been in a good spot to do a emergency podcast. So thank you very much for getting it out when we could do this.
Hey, guess what? By the way, for the listeners from earlier, I have some breaking news related to the show.
Breaking news presented by Rothman Orthopedics.
I convinced.
Depending on how night goes, it might be, yeah.
I convinced Derek and Devon to go to the Sphere. We will be going tonight. We have our off day from the show tomorrow. I got the boys to agree to go see Dead and Company. Mission accomplished. I need that banner that W. Bush had on that aircraft carrier in the background. We are going to the Sphere.
I'm going with the fellas to hang out there at the Sphere to check it out. I'm going in honor of my guy Bill Walton, checking out the Dead and Company. Yeah, so there we go. So Sphere it is. We'll catch up with everybody again on Saturday at 2 p.m. That's 11 a.m. On this side here on the West Coast in Las Vegas, 2 p.m. on a Saturday. So Saturday conversation with you all. This show, again, was presented by our good friends from Rothman Orthopedics. We're not going to be jumping up and down enough where we pop any ligaments or tear anything, fist pumping, none of that stuff. But it is still presented by Rothman Orthopedics. We appreciate everybody for checking in for this emergency podcast this afternoon on a Thursday. Thank you to Kyle, Derek, and Bree. I'm Devon. No roll call. We did that earlier, so we'll roll call it when we get back on Saturday. Everybody have a great rest. And yes, look at it. Gene Ross in there, Kyle. John Mayer. White girl's going to go crazy.
Hear me up, baby. That's right, Eugene. Let's go.
Hey, fella, everybody out there, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you on Saturday at 2 p.m. right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast.